and welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I'm Noelle. I'm one of the founders of Lumia Coaching. I'm your host today. And with me, I have one of our students currently in our signature program. Carly, we cracked this idea at the retreat this year. It is so wonderful to be with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to do this podcast. It's awesome to be here and just to connect with you again. So I'm super excited to jump in.
Yeah, this is like making my day to have a community edition of our time together. So I wanted to share a little bit about how the idea for today came about. And then we can get into who you are in the world and what folks need to know to set us up for our time today. So we had our Lumia retreat in Philadelphia this year, and one of the things that we were talking about was how people find their niche, how people find their voice. And in real time, we, all of us gathered, watched you kind of come to this aha moment, and you stood up and said who you were and who you wanted to work with. And it was crystal clear and it was really inspiring. And at that point, I said, do you want to come on the podcast and talk about this idea and the process of like coming into your own as who you want to be as a coach? So that was how this all came to be. And I want to pass the ball over to you to tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thanks for that intro and for reminding me of that moment at the retreat because that was really such a special moment. And just a little bit about my background. So I'm a 25-year employee of the defense industry. I'm in engineering. I've led large teams. I've presented to like officials at all levels of the government and military, and internally in my company as well. It's a huge company. And I have no problem standing up and talking about technical issues and, product roadmaps and system of systems integration and really complex things. But when it comes to talking about myself as a person, and then my goal of kind of, eventually having a career pivot into more of a life coaching type of future, I was really just freezing up. And I honestly, I didn't understand why when I have this like extensive background in public speaking and I've never really had a problem opening up in front of even large crowds. But it was awesome just to be able to work through it in such a, safe and comforting environment that you've brought together in Lumia. It was really the perfect place. I'm so glad I was able to come to the retreat because I did grow so much in just that one short weekend. It was really incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good time. We have such a good crew, and that's the whole point of really everything we do at Lumia is giving all of you space to become who you are. So, something I've been talking about, you may have heard me talking about it, is I think my theme for 2026 is really going to be Mr. Rogers. And when Mr. Rogers said, if there are times of trouble, if you're feeling sad, look for the helpers because the helpers are always there. And when I was thinking about you, that's really what came to mind is you are showing up in a big way as one of the helpers. So can you tell us a little bit about who the people are that you think you can help and what's behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of coming up throughout my career in the defense industry, it's an extremely heavily male dominated field. There's a lot of former military men in my workplace, and they can be just like very dominating of conversations. They can, not necessarily be wanting to hear ideas from everyone. And it can be tough to, even as, a very educated and accomplished person, it can be very tough to get a word in edgewise. And I've struggled through this for 25 years, and now at my level of seniority, I've kind of gotten through a lot of those barriers, but really by brute force, and not by a lot of mentoring and coaching and guidance that was given to me. So that's really what I want to change for the next wave of up and coming kind of mid career women in the defense industry, because we do have kind of a unique set of challenges that we face, and that I'm kind of uniquely able to help coach and guide people through, having struggled through it myself and seen so many of my female peers kind of struggle with a lot of the exact same things.
Absolutely. And, thinking about coaching and what we do as coaches and the way that our unique experiences play into the world, what's coming up for me is thinking about those ICF core competencies and that curiosity of, sitting here looking at the two of us, right? If you and I walked into a restaurant together, nobody would have any idea that I'm a CEO and that you are a really senior defense industry engineer. Packing a powerful punch, the two of us in a room, big time in many directions. And yet, when we start to peel the onion in terms of difficult environments, spaces and places where people from all sorts of different aspects of difference might have a hard time with their own visibility, with their confidence, with their voices. This plays into where coaches really need to use curiosity to find out, well, who is somebody really? What's underneath? What's that experience like? And having that really unique intersection yourself and having overcome so many barriers, you're in this space where you can really coach folks into stepping up, speaking up, standing out, which is incredible. Um, so when you think about the folks that are going to be your future clients in this space, what part of your own story really jumps out for you? What were some moments that you either had to speak up, step up, or stand out for yourself, and what did it feel like inside?
I think a lot of it, a lot of what's coming up has to do with the fact that like we keep secrets for a living. And so it takes like a certain type of person to sign up for that in the first place. Often we spend 8 or 9 hours a day in a dark room with no windows, with no electronics. We have computers in there, but not connected to the outside world, no cell phones, and we're just in there. And I can't obviously talk about what goes on in there, but that's like the environment. You can probably start to get a sense of like what the environment is like, and that can be like people's entire week is working in an environment like that. And so when you think about the mentality of the type of younger woman that has signed up for this job and really believes in the mission and the purpose and wants to do a great job, but like you're getting at, inside we're all just human and we need that connection. And but we're also kind of like used to just being in this dark room and kind of this closed off environment. So like you saw with me at the retreat, it can be just that much harder to kind of crack into like the humanity of the person. But inside, like you saw with me, the person is just dying to be seen and heard and acknowledged. And once they finally can feel that, the sky's the limit for what they can accomplish. It's really that keeping secret and stuck as a human. We have to do it for our jobs, but we don't have to do it to ourselves. And yet often we do.
So, Carly, thank you so much for that. I think the metaphor of working and living in a space where you're supposed to keep secrets is so strong in terms of how people might internalize that role of like, I have to keep myself quiet. I have to keep, myself secret. Um, at what point did you gain awareness, or did you see someone else, or did you think to yourself like, this doesn't need to be me, this doesn't need to be the way that I show up?
Yeah, I think it's all just still happening, because the environment, it's still extremely male dominated. There's still kind of a lack of um, you know, I guess I don't want to say a lack of like good female role models, because there are some now that, but certainly coming up in the company in my 20s and 30s, I really struggled for a lack of like good women mentors in high profile leadership roles. And so honestly, like a lot of this transformation is still kind of happening for me,
Wow.
to be able to show up like with my actual personality like in meetings and stuff, and not just to speak up with my good ideas and trust that they'll be heard and acted upon, but to really show up as like my full self and not be so self-censoring. And what I've found has happened is that, it is okay to speak up even if it's imperfect, and that's how you build the credibility. It's not by like waiting until things are perfectly polished. One, because the moment may pass, and it often does, but then because, nobody wants like a perfect polished answer all the time, even though they may seem like they do. They want the real answer and the truth. And often that's what comes out when you're just kind of being your real self with all your real experience and just kind of showing up and doing the thing without overthinking it so much.
I don't think this is a coincidence that this is coming up for you while you're in the signature program, because this sounds a heck of a lot like what we train in coach training, is that you don't have to be perfect all the time. There is no such thing as a perfect question. Authenticity and curiosity and straight shooting is the most important aspect of being a strong strategic, coach partner. So as you're kind of thinking about this, how has being in coach training played into your own transformation?
Yeah, honestly, it's completely changed the way I show up at work. And I've always thought of myself as a helper, and I've always offered to mentor people, and I have mentored many, many people over the years. But I was actually talking about this with Bonnie yesterday. We had a mentor group, and it occurred to me that, I teach a class, like a specific class, once a year at work, and it's for high potential, up and coming kind of mid career employees. So basically, like my target client in a way. And what I noticed and was so striking was that I've taught this class for 5 years. At the end, I always offer to mentor people. I say, I have a couple mentoring slots open, please reach out. Nobody has ever reached out to me for mentoring from that class specifically. But then this past year, as I was beginning signature, like 4 people reached out to me for mentoring. And
Wow.
then, I didn't even really realize how differently I was showing up until then, because I was like, wow, it's like something has changed, for that many people to notice and to like to want to, engage with me in that way after zero before. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
So I heard you say that coming up through the ranks, you haven't felt that you've had that many role models and mentors that you could draw from in your work. But what have you noticed about the importance of diversity in information, and what happens when people who have information that usually don't speak up, what happens for the good of all when they do?
Yeah, it's so important because, when you're working on really complex problems, you want the most breadth of ideas, because if you just have 10 of the same people sitting in a room and saying the same thing, it's like that's not going to spark any creativity or innovation. And for us to stay, for our military to like continue to have state of the art equipment and to be, leading the world in, in how well equipped we are and everything, we really need the best and the brightest. And that's not just like hiring the people with the highest GPAs, but it's about getting that breadth of ideas so that you can really kind of pick and choose the best ones, and ones that, again, like those same 10 people in the room are not going to think of. But once you start allowing people to come in, oh, and then if you have 10 very different people, but 5 of them don't have a voice because they feel like, they're not going to be heard or they don't feel comfortable speaking up, then you only have 5 of this, it's even worse. So it's just so important for everyone to come with their, full ideas and to feel comfortable speaking them, and having them, be part of the discussion.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a really interesting point. And I think this is really at the crux of why this is such a coachable topic for individuals who are in that room. So, what you shared has long been validated in all of entrepreneurial literature, the best and the brightest, Harvard Business Review, management literature, that, diversity, period, diversity of ideas is the ingredient that leads to innovation. We know this. What has long been held is that it's up to the organization or the manager or the leader to create spaces in which everyone's voice can rise and flourish. Now, you and I both know that that's not really happening in many, many, many spaces and places, and that the onus does actually fall on the shoulders of individuals to figure out how to step up, stand out, speak up, and even if your idea is not adopted, have the both the humility and the courage to say, "Well, I got it over the line." When I
Hmm.
mirror that back to you, what does that feel like for you to have that reality just kind of put out there?
Yeah, it feels like, understanding. It feels good to kind of have it validated as, because sometimes I do get caught in my own head about like, oh, this industry is so unique, but and it is in some ways, but I think it has a lot of like very broad applicability to, other industries. There's a lot of like very heavily male dominated industries where similar challenges, I'm sure, occur.
And as we're talking about like diversity of voices, in industrial military complexes, in defense contracting, from a cultural perspective, what you're sharing about heavily male dominated, male gendered spaces is not unique. And another thing that I want to point out is it's not always a gender based variation that causes folks to be in spaces where they can't speak up, or they're not heard. Sometimes it's just the cultural norm, of a given environment that doesn't allow voices to rise up and be heard. And it is oftentimes for women a really specific point where you need to kind of figure out your personal brand in a way that gets things over the line, or as an individual to figure out your own personal brand that gets things over the line. When I was early on in the space of entrepreneurship, a lot of the spaces that I were in were very heavily male dominated. And John and I would have routine experiences where folks would be asking him the questions instead of me, and he would say, "She's the CEO," like I'm the talent. Like, I'm not going to know this information. You're going to have to ask Noelle. And I was really, often at my wit's end for what I needed to do in order to be seen. And there was a point at which um, I stopped trying to fit in.
Mm.
I stopped trying to look the part. It had been suggested to me that I needed to wear tapered jeans and blazers. Um, One person who is a mentor even went so far as to suggest that I slam binders on the table at different pitch meetings that I would be in, so that I would at least be remembered as binder girl. And I was like, man, like this isn't working for me. But me as my authentic self, I'm a great standout weirdo if I'm wearing my flannel shirt or my trucker hat, maybe not a blazered and tapered jeans, but I'll stand out just enough. Um, what what are some ways that you think folks can kind of cultivate their secret sauce, and what has started happening for you as you've started being your authentic self in spaces?
Honestly, it's hard. It's so different for everybody because, and I think the number one thing that people could try is, just I like to think about tiny experiments. I read a book about that pretty recently, and really just kind of thinking of something that feels just uncomfortable enough, like not too uncomfortable, but a little bit of a stretch. Just trying it out and like seeing that you're still safe, it's okay. Whether it's challenging yourself to just say something in a certain meeting. Sometimes people will go to these like weekly meetings or tag ups or something, and they're just quiet, And, you know, maybe just for example, you could challenge yourself to just speak up like one time in that meeting and then, but really reflect on it and see like, hey, that was okay. And then, you know, just kind of build it slowly from there. Because sometimes what I see happen that's unfortunate is that people will you know, get the message like, oh, I need to put myself out there, I need to like become much more visible in these meetings, and then they'll kind of crash in with like a lot of stuff going on, and then they get a lot of negative feedback, and then they're like even more in their little bubble than they were before. So I think there's really an art to it. And honestly, I think that's what coaching can really help with, is like identifying, you know, what are those incremental steps that you might want to take to kind of crack into this whole thing without discouraging yourself or anything along those lines.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was getting more and more delighted because I was recognizing the impact of coach training on your psyche. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like textbook coaching. You take a small step, you experiment with it, you evaluate what happened, what could I have done differently? Do I want to keep the same step forward? Do I want to take another one? And you're absolutely right. It's that experimentation piece. So, you know, when oftentimes when we're talking about coaching, and there are these big ideas of like, all right, you know, who is this for? It is for women in the defense industry, you know, period, right? And so then the question becomes, well, what does this really look like, boots on the ground? And what you're describing is standing with someone, walking beside them as they identify not hypothetical, but real opportunities day in and day out to create small experiments to flex, to show their authentic selves, to share their ideas, then come back to the table with the coach who is not only a trusted partner, but a trusted partner with a lot of experience in these spaces to dissect and reflect what happened, how did it go, where do we go from here, and then to literally strategize on taking the next step forward safely. And I want to emphasize safely because that's such a huge part of um, risk taking within coaching. You know, there are capital R risks and there are lowercase r risks. And even when we're running a framework like life design, you know, that's one of the pieces, is to run basically a prototype and identify, well, how could I do this in a risk-free environment where I can get information, where I can gather data. How do you think your life could have been changed if you had yourself as a coach 10 years ago?
That's a great question. Um, a few ways kind of leap to mind. Specifically, 10 years ago, I was in, you know, a really difficult role at work, and it was great for about a year. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I traveled a ton. It was really wonderful, but it quickly got to be just too much. You know, it was very physically demanding. It was demanding on my life. You know, my friendships and you know, kind of other relationships were significantly suffering. My health was suffering. You know, it just got bad pretty fast. And I think the number one thing is that if I had anyone to talk to, that I never would have stayed. I stayed for like 4 more years. So I just like get a chill thinking about just how my life would be different if I hadn't stayed for those 4 more years. Because I'd already gotten all the good stuff out of the first year, and then just went from kind of bad to worse. Um, but you know, it's hard to say in hindsight because a lot of good has happened since then too, and who knows like how everything would have turned out. But I think that is one of the things that a coach can do for people, is just having that mirror reflecting your experience back to you, and having someone like really hold the space for you to talk through what's going on. It can become very apparent like, hey, this is a terrible situation, it's not getting better, you know, and once you face that, you can figure out what to do next. But I had no one to even really talk to about it, so it was kind of crazy.
Yeah. And when you have no one to talk to about your life, about your world, it's very hard to carve out those reflective spaces through which to gain awareness. And so often in coaching, just awareness itself becomes the key to really, you know, everything. Before
Yeah.
you started in coach training, and this is really common, a lot of people come into coach training and they think they know what coaching was all about. Where are you in that journey? Did you did you know what coaching was, or were you kind of close, or were you wrong? Like, what's that transformation been like for you?
So I came into coach training because I had been working with a wellness coach for about 2 years before, and my my work with her really transformed my life in many ways. Just learning better ways to take care of myself, learning better ways to cope with all the stress I was under, just learning that taking care of myself is important. I never even really thought about that before, but working with her just really changed my life, and it got me thinking like, oh, I want to be able to do this for other people. And so that's kind of what led me to coaching and led me to Lumia. But even with all that being said, and even with how wonderful she is, her program is, I would call it really a mix of coaching and probably consulting, I guess. With, she gives a lot of information, she gives a lot of guidance. So it's not just coaching, although it does have an aspect of coaching. But coming in and learning how to do like just the coaching, I really had no idea. I didn't know about the frameworks. I thought I was a great listener, but man, I had so much to learn about listening, which has really changed how I interact with people kind of across the board. So it's been really awesome to learn so much in such a short time.
Yeah, and it's amazing how listening, speaking, cultivating trust, developing your personal brand really all kind of blend together and go hand in hand to like form a really dynamic skill set. So what I'm hearing from you is that since coming into coach training, you've blossomed professionally in a way you didn't know was possible. You're garnering more trust and safety at work where people are now coming to you for mentoring. And you have found this really powerful niche where you actually see from a hardcore strategic perspective how you can help people develop small experiments to lead them towards using their voice in highly technical, highly sensitive situations where literally, for the good and safety of all, many ideas need to be expressed and expressed well. That's absolutely incredible. Hats off to you, Carly. Like, seriously.
Oh, thank you. It's
Yeah.
nice to hear.
Yes. So if okay, so now let's multiply you by like 100. If every woman in the defense industry was able to work with you as a coach on this particular set of strategic issues, how do you think that people's lives and organizations would be changed?
Honestly, I would like to think that the entire culture would shift in a pretty profound way, where we would have representation up at the highest levels of leadership. And it wouldn't just be like, oh, I can speak up in meetings, I can have my voice be heard. It would be so much more than that. It would be like my voice is that leaders are asking for, my opinion, and the opinions of all these up and coming women that have really great ideas. They were hired for a reason. They're part of the team, and I think that culture shift, um, if the work I'm doing here could broaden and could be, truly instilled, I think, the sky is the limit with the culture shift that could occur. And with that, I think we'd become so much more productive, so much more efficient, so much more innovative. And I think it would be just a much better place to work. I could even see a world where more young girls go into like science and engineering if the culture of these like big engineering companies wasn't so, stodgy and kind of like not so fun seeming. I could see a world where these disciplines start to seem actually more fun because there are like fun senior women that are representing like how great it is to work in these industries.
I'm gonna cry. This is exactly why this was an important podcast to do because, like, you're breaking the future into reality right now and saying, this is the amplifying factor. And when you coach one woman, that woman becomes a better manager, a better coach to her team, a better parent, a better neighbor, a better auntie, a better friend. And then these ripple effects are created. And this is how we do it. This is how we change the world, one life at a time, one voice at a time. And you've already begun. So, let's keep going, and let's keep, shouting out not only the power of coaching, but the need to bring visibility and really strategic output to the individuals who might be suffering, within this industry. I know you're certainly not alone in Lumia. I shared with you before we hopped on that just in my last open house, I had 3 women who were part of the defense industry, either retired or current, who said, I need to do something differently because this is killing me. And I was thinking about you, Carly, and I was like, well, help is on the way. We have
Here.
someone who knows how to do this. This is awesome. So what advice might you give to someone who's listening, who's either thinking like, I need to take this first step in my own life, I need to take this first step in turning around my own experience, where can they begin?
Do you mean someone that, like one of my target clients, kind of a mid-career woman in the defense industry?
Yeah, let me redo the question.
Okay.
So if if we're giving if we're saying, okay, thinking about the women who might be listening to this podcast and saying, that's me. I am one of the women that Carly can help, and I know that I need to take my first step towards changing the way that I experience myself. What would you say to that person? What is the first step that somebody might be able to take?
So I would say, I would love to have just a low pressure, zero commitment conversation with any such person that, sees themselves in anything I've shared here and is interested in seeing what support might look like. Just even having that initial conversation can be so powerful because it can help people kind of feel seen and to understand that there is a whole community out here, even if it's not apparent when you're stuck in that room for 8 or 9 hours a day with no windows and no cell phone, that there is a community of us, people that care about the future of our industry and about making things easier for the people that are coming after us. So, I'd encourage people to reach out to me just for just a very casual conversation to share our experiences. And it doesn't have to be me either. There's other people doing this type of work. But if I could leave people with anything, it's just that, having the support of a coach in your corner, it's just life changing. It's so wonderful. And I see it again and again, both, in my own experience and with my peers in Lumia and with, others just in my personal life that have had the experience of working with a coach, whether it's a wellness coach, a life coach, a career coach. It's all good.
How about those people who are listening who are thinking about becoming a coach and they're thinking, well, who am I? Who am I to step up and do this work? I think I'd be good at it. I love people. I want to help them, but I don't know about myself. What would you say to those folks?
Well, that was, back to what was surprising to me when I came into coach training and began learning what coaching really is. Because, of course, I had all those same thoughts. It's like, who am I to tell other people how to live their lives? That's like something I hear all the time. And it's like, well, come to find out, as a coach, that's exactly not what you're doing. You're not telling people how to live their lives. You're holding space for them as a human. You're approaching them with curiosity. You're giving them a chance to tell their story and then to walk with them as they design those little experiments to see how they can improve their lives. And I would say, as long as you're curious and open and, sincere, that you should definitely give it a try. It's been wonderful for me. I've learned so much, and like I've said, it's really just changed how I show up as a human kind of across the board in my life, which has been amazing. Like, totally not what I expected. I was thinking, like, oh, this could be a retirement career. I love helping people and stuff. And I thought, just kind of get this business in place for like a later in life career. But it turned out to be so much more than that, that just the learning itself has changed my life in just such amazing ways.
I knew the second you stood up in that room at the retreat and said, "This is who I am. This is what I want to do. This is what I can do." That you were going to really take off with this, and I was so proud. And I'm crying again,
Oh.
but it's like getting to watch the transformation happen for folks in real time. Like, you can't make it up, and it's so powerful when it happens. So thank you for honestly having the bravery to come talk to me today and to demonstrate your own transformation in real time. It's been really incredible to witness you and to see how powerful you are, and to just have so much faith in the work that you're doing and will continue to do. So I'm so appreciative.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And it's just what's so wonderful to connect with you. You've built something so special in Lumia, and I'm just thankful to be a part of it. So thanks again.
You bet. Well, we'll check in as time goes on, and we'll get like part two to your story so that everybody can keep tabs.
Awesome. Sounds great.
I'll see you later.
See you later.